Hello Internet, this is another part of my opinionated guide to Sanity Studio, and today I'm going to talk about references and should you ever use a single reference in a document. Let's go and take a look. Here I've got the standard blog template, which you get when you start a new Sanity Studio and choose the blog template schema. And currently it has an array of categories, an array of references to the category document type, but it only has a single reference. And it's my opinion that at some point in the project, this isn't going to be enough. Perhaps early on when you planned out the content model or you built the studio, one reference was going to be enough. But let's think about a blog that's going to live long enough. At some point, you're probably going to collaborate on an article with more than one person. When we use a reference field, it's to create a relationship between one document type and another. And almost never is there going to be a relationship between two documents where you're not at some point going to be tempted or have the need to have that document actually relate to two documents at once. And this is especially true in this particular example where a blog post at some point is probably going to be collaborated on by more than one person. Unless you're the only author of the blog, maybe this is your personal blog, then it probably doesn't make any sense to have a reference at all because you wrote them all. But if you're going to have a reference to one thing, keep in mind that at some point you're probably going to have a reference to many of those things. And while Sanity's migration tooling is way better now than it used to be, and you could write your way out of this and move all of that content quite easily, what's easier than doing that migration is never having to do it. If you need to have one reference, there are ways to do that, and I'll show you how. So what would I do in this situation? I'd go and open the post type schema. I'd remove the title field because you don't need the title attribute on fields. We'll create a title if you need it. Let's go and define a field, and we're going to call this one, this is authors, if I can type. And this is going to be a type of array, and it's going to be of these fields. We'll use the define array member because that can change things slightly as well. And we'll add a comma. I wish that did that automatically. So now we've got an array of authors, and this is where, because I have existing data in this particular studio, I'd need to run migration tooling because this single reference needs to be moved in there. Because there's only a small amount of data, I can go ahead and add that one again. So now I fixed my content model here. If we needed to enforce that there should only ever be one user, so perhaps our front end relies on there only being one author, what we can do is add validation rules. So let's add a validation rule where there must be at max one item. This will at least protect us so that if we go and add another one, we see immediately before I've even selected a reference that the field is now invalid. This is actually really good practice. At a point of time, I would have said it would be great to remove the add item button, but that would introduce layout shift. Adding an extra item would actually shift the rest of the items around because that button would disappear all of a sudden. Also, disabling that button might seem useful, but it's good practice never to disable buttons in a form, but rather give feedback about why the button shouldn't be used at all. So now we at least have a validation rule, and it says must have at most one items. If you're not aware, you can actually customize that error message as well. So we can say, hey, don't add more than one item. We're going to need to actually use different quotes there because I used an apostrophe. So we can customize that, and perhaps you want to give your authors more reasons why that's going to be the case and why we can't have more than one. So let's remove that so the field's valid once again. And when it comes to our GROQ queries, let's go and grab just the ID of this post so I can show you what I would do in the GROQ query for this post. So let's look for just that post, if I can find the right key there. The ID is this here, and let's grab that authors array. So that's going to return us that array of the authors. But what we could do is if you said you just wanted one author, so perhaps your front end or your application that's consuming that content only needs to see that one thing, well, we could say, let's get the authors and just get the first item there. So we've still got the same data coming through to the front end as if we only had a single reference, but we now have the flexibility of an array of references. While I'm here, let me show you something else that I've begun to like to do as well with GROQ. When we have an array, if that field was undefined, it would return null. So what we can do instead is we can say that we should coalesce the authors array and otherwise return just an empty array. So if that document didn't have anything, and let's go and test that now actually, let's go and remove the reference there and publish that. So if that array was actually empty and we queried for the authors, we get null. But what we can instead do is use coalesce to say, if this is going to be null, then return an empty array. And I think this is much more secure for a front end that's going to be receiving an array to make sure that it never receives null. And TypeGen will respect this as well. It will make sure that you will always get an array of something, which is much easier to handle than having to check, is it null? Well, if not, if it's an array, then do this. That just provides a way out of one more front-end check for the type of data that's been returned. So let me know what you think. Do you agree, disagree? That's one of the ways that I have become really strict on how I like to plan my schemas, is that any reference should always be an array of references. That's how I like to use Sanity Studio. How about you? I'll see you in the next one.